got a great one coming up as well. It's going to be Poland versus South Korea. Sal, what do you make of this one so far?
This one or this day so far?
There's this match
two
so far,
kind of
as in
questions.
These two teams so far in this tournament playing against each other on week 2.
Gotcha. We're in a very weird mood today.
we are in a very weird mood.
We haven't got off to the best of starts, I'm going to be honest. Poland versus South Korea is the matchup that we have for you. Of course, this is the war between Raven and our production team. Poland, of course, the home nation. We're broadcasting out of Katowice in Poland, so our production team, native to Poland, have, of course, attached their flag to their native team. And Raven just loves South Korea and surrender and things. I don't know what the reason is. So I'm sure if things start going too well for South Korea and Raven starts getting too smug, his mic will get muted immediately and I'll just end up solo casting the series.
Yeah, I don't think I'm in any worry of someone muting my mic because I get too smug. You're the line for that, right? And you've not been muted yet, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
So I think I'm pretty safe. I'd have to do something quite incredible.
Yeah, it means the bar is set very high, right? Because I've been testing the limits for quite some time now.
Actual years. But let's take a look at the teams as well and see, less about us, more about these guys. As we see Dak Rivius, Suni, Surrender, and Stilo on that team South Korea. And just a note, Surrender could not play last week.
Yes.
But I believe he is available to play this week, as far as I'm aware at least.
Yeah, and then Dak Rivius is another huge name that I really first got my first big exposure with in Thailand at the HCT tour stop there. He was at that time the points leader, I believe, or second place in the standings for APAC. And I actually sent a lot of criticism his way for mainly his deck building decisions. He chose to put IMB Cowl and Prince Taldaram in the same deck in his Q block, which he did with full knowledge of how it was going to work, but he had his justifications. I criticized it quite heavily, and there was a lot of defense that came back at me for Dak Rivius. So he clearly, what I'm saying with this, he clearly has some supporters out there who are rooting for him. Everyone trusts that he's a great player, as I've entirely talked over these vistas of our two countries, Poland and Korea, of course. Korea, the bustling metropolis of esports that it is, which I think, honestly, is actually the reason why you're so attached to South Korea, right? It's the esports background.
Yeah, it is. It's just the, it's basically the country that esports really kicked off, became popular. Things we're even doing now, they probably started doing years and years ago. And also it's just history in other games as well. That was quite attached to other Blizzard games, of course. But let's take a look at the picks and bans. See how this matchup is going to line out with Double Druid band. Sounds like a weird beat-em-up game, Double Druid, as opposed to some other names that we're aware of. And then
instead of picking up pipes, you just find ultimate infestations on the floor.
Twigs of the World Tree. Right. So we see the two picks now. So Poland's going to have Warlock and Hunter, and guess what? South Korea is also going to have Warlock and Hunter. And Hunter really going up in the ranks in terms of picks over the last week or so.
Yes, despite the fact it wasn't actually a high win rate class last week when you look at it. But yeah, that's when the paths start to diverge, which is interesting because you'd think when things kicked off that quickly, then they would proceed quite similarly as well. But Rogue Mage ban against a Paladin Priest ban in Phase 2. And then the forced deck, that last pick is a bit of a misnomer. It's not really a pick, it's the last deck that's remaining. It's more of a forced choice by the opponent. Warrior on both sides.
Yeah, one of the biggest things to me there, though, is the fourth pick. Third pick was Shaman, actually, for the team. So it's kind of weird because Shaman last week was one of the highest pick rates in the first round of picking, if it didn't get banned, of course, straight away. And now it's actually been not only not picked first, but not banned afterwards, and then picked up in the second or third round of picking. So it's pretty interesting, actually.
Yeah, there's a slightly different strategy here, as different as it's getting, really. I will say that the deck lists in this tournament are quite homogenized. We're picking one or two differences out of a 9-deck lineup and focusing on that as a difference. But there are a couple of differences here. There's Token Druid instead of the Mali Druid. There is a Aggro Mage instead of one of the Control Mages that we're used to seeing, and there's an Even Shaman instead of one of the Shudderwock Shamans, which is the big point to you as to why Shudderwock was why Shaman was left until later.
Right, and as we see the way the matchups line up, it's going to kick off with Dogmeat versus Stilo. Paladin on Hunter, so not really the best start because Hunter does struggle a little bit with the Paladin, but in general, just touching on that Even Shaman that Poland have brought, they are going to be playing it second, and I did speak to A83650 about that, and he said, yeah, we actually thought about Even Shaman. We don't think that Shudderwock's in a great place in this tournament right now, so we tested it in some pick orders, some bans, etc., played it a little bit, and we're like, yeah, we actually think Even Shaman might be good. He didn't say it definitely was, he said he was using this week to test it.
Ooh,
Yeah.
curious. I assume Poland are 1-0 after week 1, right?
Yeah,
because there's no way you would be testing things week 2 if you were 0-1 down at this point. But that's fascinating to me, actually, because I personally feel that Shudderwock's currently in a bad place in Conquest format and in a good place in this format. So A8, clearly a much better player than me. I mean, he's at the World Championship. I'm not.
That's true.
Well, not playing at the World Championship. TBC.
Next year. I will just say a final note on that thought is just that and your explanation of why you think it's good in this format is because you have multiple bans, right? So you can ban away multiple aggressive decks and have the control matchups or more of the control matchups available, just to round that out for people who might not realize. But we're going to kick it into game number 1. It's Poland versus South Korea. Poland on the Paladin and South Korea on the Hunter. Egg Hunter that you've just seen Falcon Lorinda talk a lot about, actually.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit sad that South Korea have had to queue this into the Paladin because I love where they're at with their Death Rattle Hunter list. This is exactly where I'm at with it now as well. As Falk mentioned, if you're watching the previous series, we all got together over the weekend and decided to just lab this deck out a bit because it kind of appeared as we were prepping for this tournament. We didn't want to be too weak on it. Straight away, I said, okay, I don't want to be playing Keleseth. That sounds dumb. Let's play Loot Hoarders instead. And then we picked up the Grievous Bite list, which was posted around. And then as we were playing it, it was like, Grievous Bite just seems like the worst card. Can we replace it with a Stitch Tracker? And yeah, that's exactly what South Korea have done. 2 Loot Hoarders, 1 Stitch Tracker, and pretty much the core that you guys should be fairly used to seeing by now.
Yep, and that tracking into Devil's Claw Egg is about as good as it's going to get. And we see the off-stream match update there. Japan 1-0 over Portugal so far in their match. But let's get back to this one. And Egg is absolutely huge here. There is Terra Scale, into the Egg afterwards, so the proc is already there in hand. They picked it up off the tracking, so I would say Stilo and Team Korea in an okay place. They do have Witchwood Grizzly, they do have Deathstalker Rexar, they can survive, but then after that it's all going to be about how powerful that these beasts are going to be, right? You need to craft the taunts, the big health taunts, similar to what we saw in the previous series, or some AoE beasts, or something to flip the game state, because you are going to be behind against Paladin. That's just the way this matchup goes.
Right. Poland just using a single Firefly here. I think turn 1 on coin is one of the most hotly contested turns for Paladin as to whether you're supposed to coin hero power in some matchups, coin 2 1-drops in some matchups, just play a single 1-drop in others. There's a myriad of impacts where it's, do you need to contest board? Are you potentially trying to set up a quick Divine Favor? All of these kind of things come into it, but Poland just playing it simple, Firefly go.
Yeah, one thing they have to consider against the Hunter is just the potential appearance of a Candle Shot means that these 1/1 Divine Shields, they just knock the Divine Shield off and not really lose a lot, whereas you've lost that protection Divine Shield minion, whether that be protecting your other minions in the likes of the Righteous Protector, or if you want to play Blessing of Might, for example, on 1 to make it harder to deal with and push that extra damage. I will say that, just some heads up as Dogmeat and Team Poland decide how to approach turn 2 with the coin as well. Kind of just as impactful as turn 1 a lot of the time.
Press the button and pass.
Well, I know that's what you think, mate, but I will say, if this Devil's Claw Egg is played next turn from South Korea, and it more than likely will be, it is also more than likely going to be popped and something to be done with it, that 5/5, or even just left open as a 5/5, because rule number 1, if you may not be experienced playing against this Hunter, you kill the eggs, you kill the death rattles, you pop them, because it means they can't just be cubed and recreated all over again, because that's the true threat of the deck.
Yeah, and I think this setup is perfectly reasonable. The argument here for coining out another 1-drop is that they can potentially get more value out of a raid leader on the following turn to go through an egg. But with Champion's Maul in hand, they already have the perfect setup for dealing with an egg if they really, really want to, and they can keep going wider on the board.
Yeah, it's going to be fairly straightforward. They can even just play the Righteous Protector to just block the 5/5 attack out.
Yeah,
these are the issues you have a lot of the time in a lot of other matchups. Your opponent can't really interact with the egg that well on these early turns, right? Whereas Paladin just always has, at least 2 minions going into this egg turn, right? More often than not. I guess they're just working out how exactly they want to do this.
Yeah, the second Mauler's kind of complicated the hand a little bit, just in terms of when they want to sequence those, which turns are they getting the usage out of the attacks, when do they want the two different effects of the two different Mauls to line up. Meanwhile, of course, as you said, dealing with the egg is paramount here. And as you mentioned, it Righteous Protector does seem fairly wise in this position when your opponent's about to have a 5-5 that they can attack with.
Yeah, and there's no Explosive Trap, there's no Unleash the Hounds, there's no Punish. So the board really being wide outside of Rexxar, however much you consider Rexxar a Punish. It's not a card you can realistically play around most of the time, especially with Paladin.
There you go. If you're looking for the reality of why you are supposed to give your opponent a free 5-5 on their turn, look at this hand.
I don't want to.
Yeah, there's the second egg that they can just start again, but then that second egg gets dealt with, and this 5-5 is just not pressure right now. Suddenly, if South Korea get two 5-5s on the board from their two eggs, then there's worlds where, you know, you're still Hunter. You can still try and race with two 5-5s on the board, especially if you Rexxar clear soon afterwards. But this solitary 5-5 is not going to do anything against the board that Paladin are building back against them.
Yeah, I'd be surprised, to be completely honest, if there's not a flanking shot this turn. Just to actually kill off one of the 1/1s and create a minion, so it's like 2 birds, 1 stone. But I will say that the one checkbox that South Korea have ticked right now is there is no coin into power play turn 5 for this in this game. There's no coin into level up, coin into Fungomancer. That doesn't happen. They have one more turn to try and chill this board out, I would say, and they really have to make something happen. This is as good as it's going to get, to be honest. The flanking strike with a 5-4 and a 3-3 on the board now. You do contest, but it's just the width of the board that's the issue.
It's like time to handle it to me.
Yeah, especially because that 5-4 is a 5-4.
We're in the business as HGG casters of interpreting and lip reading in non-native languages. And I'm almost certain what happened there is that the turn passed to Dogmeat picked up Raid Leader, someone in his ear said, whoa, let's think about this, and Dogmeat's gesture seemed to be, all right, go on then, find a better play than Raid Leader this turn.
And then they're like, nah, mate. It's like done.
But of course, assuming that did happen, the person in his ear telling him to slow down is of course 100% correct. Even if Raid Leader is obviously the best play, you don't get an A for doing it in 5 seconds.
We were just talking about that famous quote.
The light protects me.
Ardent Squire going down just so something is likely to stick even through a worst case scenario. Although I don't even know what that worst case scenario is at this point.
No interest in protecting the Raid Leader this turn, it looks like. Just going to try and force through damage where they can.
Did someone stop him and go, wait, do we want to attack?
3 seconds left on the rope. Let's really think about this.
Weird, definitely weird with 2 weapons in hand.
Yeah.
Portugal evened it up versus Japan though, while we've been talking Hunter. 1-on-1 now in that match. This is the worst part. Like, you have to play Grizzly into this, and it is horrible.
It's not the worst thing in the world based on Poland's hand, though. They don't have any teeth remaining. Their one big push card, their one big threat is that Raid Leader currently. I still can't believe I have to say things like that now.
That Raid Leader is a threat.
Yes.
A big threat.
What is 2018? I don't understand. But yeah, without that Raid Leader pushing damage for them, like just a 3-8 taunt is actually kind of a big deal.
The 3 attacks definitely a big deal. I think there was just a small pause for Team Korea, just saying, wait, is Candle Shot and a 3-3 ever better because we -1 minion off the board, right? And it's just something to consider. You get the Candle Shot live, you know, you remove 1 more minion, that's a pretty big deal. And
boy.
Let's rip some voids open as that Grizzly is going to go bye-bye a little bit easier than planned.
You do make a 2-5 though. How much do you care about that? Because right now, Rexxar is the card that you're scared of. And right now, a 2-5 is a much better card alongside Deathstalker Rexxar than a 5-2 would be.
That's true. Does it matter if they have to plow their board into the 3-8 anyway?
No.
There you go.
Yeah.
Solved. I will say as well, though, that Defender Vargas is played in this deck ×2.
Let me think.
So the 2-5 doesn't look too scary right now, but when it's a 3/6 taunt, that is progressively more scary because that becomes almost the Grizzly itself, right? That's almost the same minion.
And again, living in Deathstalker Exile world, which I say you probably have to. You definitely don't have to. But like, if you're going to live in that world, do you try and take down some of this board state as well? Poland's answer is a definitive nope.
I think they're taking the approach of, well, we didn't do it last turn. We pushed a lot of extra damage. We have a Vine Cleaver. Let's push some extra damage, you know, and just keep going, because they do have effectively lethal with this Vine Cleaver over 3 turns until this Rexar hits the board.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually a fine plan.
Yeah, and the more I looked at it, I kind of talked myself out of it mid-sentence. But actually, you have a hand that just doesn't really interact well with Deathstalker Exile, whatever you do. So shutting your eyes and ignoring it is probably just a better plan in that position. Oh, hey, buddy, a little bit late to the party.
Okay, so the problem now is I did talk a lot about the Vine Cleaver, but that is still 1 turn away.
Yeah.
It's not, you cannot just Vine Cleaver and go right now. So I think it's just not many options here, but Stonehill might get you something worthwhile.
This tracking could also make a mess of the plan, because as you mentioned, double Argus in there. The longer that South Korea can hold out without needing to Argus, the closer they get and the more likely they get to just drawing a natural Argus or condensing the deck to the point where 2 Argus is very likely outcome off a tracking.
This will be a big win.
Huge.
For Team Korea. If they should not win this game on paper.
Nope.
And this is one of the pitfalls that you have, is that you can do the pick and ban phase, but if you don't hit a good matchup, you can just take the loss. It's gonna be a little bit rough for Team Poland if they take the loss here.
We need Falcone's guide to what's a good card off Stonehill Defender here.
So Shield Bearer is a 0/4 1-mana taunt, being the game from ran out of the other 2. Grizzly's okay, except there's too many cards in hand, and I didn't see the 3rd one. Senjin?
Yeah, Senjin.
Senjin is like the OG good taunt, right? Senjin Shieldmaster was just played in almost every single deck.
Witchwood number 2. Something that I didn't even consider. We were talking about the Argus, but of course the Witchwood is there available as well.
You pretend you're Paladin and press the button.
You're always pressing the button. Yes, I guess you are, right?
You can make game-winning beasts.
Witchwood Grizzly Candle Shot this turn allows you to take care of a 1/1. You don't play around Fungalmancer, but you do play around Level Up. But you're probably in a world. It's a definite world where Level Up is only. That Fungalmancer could be a level up, and the card off the top could be a level up. Yes. The rest of the hand is not level up.
The way I was thinking it was, you don't necessarily need the Grizzly this turn, so you're playing Candle Shot no matter what. Sorry, I didn't finish my thought, but in my world, you were never not equipping Candle Shot this turn because you remove one of the 1/1s.
Okay.
This is also decent. I guess the power of this turn is kind of, you can't really argue against it. My only worry is cards like Vine Cleaver, cards like Leroy. Because honestly, some of the beasts against Paladin, you just win the game if you get it.
You still have Witchwood Grizzly in hand though, right? That's you can still fall back on that. And I actually I looked at the hand, and yeah, I was in a slightly different line before I thought everything through. But it definitely felt like a turn where you didn't want to press Hero Power for 2 mana, because for me, Deathstalker Rexar in this matchup is not necessarily a Builder Beast card. It's that one big AoE that you need.
Oh, yeah, that's the most important.
Then you can push back on tempo, right? And Stilo and Korea actually had a higher tempo play in hand in a variety of ways than they could have made from the Beast. So personally, I'm looking at this hand and saying, play these cards that we have available, and then when we run out of stuff, we can fall back on the Beast after.
Whereas I've had a lot of moments where if you build a Beast and don't die, which is extremely unlikely in this position, Rush Lifesteal, big taunt.
The Eternal Optimist.
No, well, I mean, look, you get it fairly often. You get one of those 2 things
reasonably
fairly often. Yes. And you have a full 8 mana to do it as well, if you press the button last turn. So that's how I would have gone. Oh.
The absolute lad.
Wow.
So tracking Stalker.
No harm in tracking.
Tracking Stalker Argus looks like the most likely line to me. Raven, I know you live in playing high main is always correct world.
Not when you've already won the game. So come on.
Okay.
I was shocked. I've heard from some players, because obviously this is a list that I think everyone is trying right now. Some players don't think high main's a good card in the deck.
Get in the bin.
Blasphemy!
Yeah.
Leave! But this is huge. I mean, we're kind of joking around right now, but we got to the point now where there aren't really the cards left in the Paladin deck that beat this.
Nope.
It would be Stonehill into Tarim.
Nope.
And
try again.
Then Stilo misclicks.
Yeah.
He builds a beast that somehow does, 17 damage to yourself. I don't know.
Nah, this is just.
You're not built to do this, right?
This is just a big, fat, sweaty GG.
Huge win for Korea.
It is.
Once and if they take it. Don't want to speak until the Paladin sings. Until Sol sings, because that's what we've been doing all in our break earlier.
Shh.
Out of my jungle!
So Drake Corsair, good if you've got a weapon up.
Yep. Which does.
Rage Protector's just good. Tyrion's pretty cool too.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. High-level breakdown as always, Raven.
No, in all seriousness. To me, Righteous Protector is almost as good as Dread Corsair, like maybe better anyway. Cheaper and just as awkward to deal with. The egg is there though, and as well as the weapon, so that's why you try and dodge these instances with Righteous Protector. Why we saw it so powerful early on when there was just a 5/5 on the board.
Reporting for duty.
Ooh, okay, that's a huge whiff. With the egg dealt with.
Sol,
Yes.
can we press the button this turn?
We can press the button
Okay,
this turn,
thank
Raven.
you. Yay!
Timberwolf, I would have expected.
I'm yelling timber.
This game is certainly going down.
So Stegadon's just fine. Didn't go for it though, right? Wait, what was the?
Yeah, that could still be Stegadon.
Oh wait, Stegadon. Yeah, it's 4 mana, right? For some reason I thought it was 5. I don't know, but yeah, that makes
That'd be a
sense.
really bad card.
It's already not great.
Fair enough. I think we just both said the same thing, honestly. Is it Grizzly this time, though? Instead of the beast?
Not like randomly lethal, is it? Before we just go crazy.
No, no way.
Well, I was almost certain, but there's a board full of 6/6 and 5/5, so you've just got to quickly check when they get +1 attack.
Yeah, there was also 3 taunts in play and no way to change that dynamics.
Argent Squire, no matter how good a mini it is, on turn 9 with a board full of beasts and dinosaurs, it's probably just not that good.
Yeah. And now Poland just find themselves out of taunts, which is bad news.
Kind of out of options as well. Divine Favor's just dead. Even if they can cast it to draw some cards, they'll have to play enough of their own cards that they wouldn't be able to play anything to draw anyway.
Reporting for duty.
Old Paladin is just such a suspect deck as soon as it has to go on the defensive. As soon as it doesn't have everything going its way, the game plan just completely falls apart. Quite often it is Vine Cleaver that's the fallback in that situation.
I will say as well, though, in the current meta, there aren't many decks that provide a board like this to Paladin, though.
It's true.
Think about the control decks. All they want to do is remove things, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you often find the thing is, oh, can the Vine Cleaver get me enough value to just outpace them and win the game eventually? You can't face down this. Like, and there aren't really, there's like this and maybe Warlock post Gul'dan that do this to you. And that's it in the game, to be honest. Bloat Bat. Oh, it's so good.
You're right.
Play Dead a Bloat Bat.
You having a moment?
GG. Game.
Having a moment, Raven?
I have a moment where, look, Hunter's being played, the Hunter deck is quite intricate and cool, and it's South Korea controlling it.
Booyah!
Tick the
Steal,
boxes for me.
even, style points, double play dead. Just because game 1 to Korea, and it's a huge break of serve as well, because that is one of the worst matchups in the game for that Hunter deck. It's the one that, maybe when we were talking about like the Grievous Bite tech earlier on, it's the one matchup where, maybe that's why that card is in there, but even then, like, it just didn't seem to help enough. Paladin was still overrunning us when we were testing out the matchup, so again, just a massive win, and now they're walking into what Warlock versus Shaman, having found a massive advantage that they just really would not have been expecting to have after those matchups came down.
Yeah, and then the Shaman versus the Warrior. Korea's looking pretty sweet right now, I would say.
Yeah, this is, though, Q-Block against Even Shaman, right? Which is not the expected matchup. If you watch week 1, you'd be saying this was Shudderwock versus Even Lock every single time.
Yeah.
But both of these teams, slightly different twist here and there on their lineup. So it is going to be the Q-Block versus the Even Shaman, which, again, Q-Block, very stable deck, but the weakness came in because most of the nerfs that came in to kind of balance Q-Block a little bit made it slightly more susceptible to aggro. That was the point of them. Even Shaman, yes, we call it an aggro deck. It's not particularly aggressive, though, right? It's not a deck that's pushing 1,000,000 damage early on, and then the fact that your Dark Pact heals for less is really a big deal.
Right.
So I think, Q-Block is still functionally intact against Even Shaman, aside from the fact that it's a turn slower, perhaps getting that Void Lord in the way. But again, Even Shaman was always the aggro deck that could deal with Void Lord the best because, of course, it has access to Hex.
Yeah, and even I feel like Q-Block has a few more ways to build it outside of Even Lock, right? Because when you're playing Cube, you can do some other things. You can go more control-y if you want. You can put Dreadlords in it, to be completely honest, especially if you're planning on banning so many decks that have an awkward matchup versus it. You can do whatever you really want with the Q-Block, and it's still going to do kind of the same thing, whereas at the moment, pre-expansion, with Even Lock, there are only so many good even cards that fit that style right now, so it's less flexible overall. But I do think Korea's looking pretty good.
Wow. So surprising. Raven's feeling it. He's feeling the South Korea bug.
I mean, they just won an incredibly difficult matchup, right? That was the one that you look at the matchups and go, okay, 0-1, let's go.
Right, but do you look at that situation and think that it's something Korea did right in the matchup or something that Poland did wrong, or was it just a matter of like Rexar on 6, no buffs on the other side?
Yeah, it was definitely. So imagine one of those Mauls Divine Shield, you just lose.
Mm-hmm.
It's as simple as that. And the one thing when we talk about Grievous Bite as well is that what it does in the matchup when it is played is it may give you that one turn of wiggle room where you're not under like hyper pressure. And then that's when you can do the Hunter things, right? And overpower them on the board, which is what we saw right towards the end. As Sol starts giggling to himself.
Sorry,
You have to tell us why, Sol. I saw it.
We have the admin preview monitors here on our desk. The two teams are involved in a test game right now as the players like log in, log out, log back in. Of course, we have to test spectator mode and all this boring nonsense you don't need to know about. But the long and short of it is that our admin just messaged the word surrender to Team Poland, which when you're playing against South Korea is about the most confusing instruction that you can receive.
Or if you surrender playing that game and they message you, you go surrender and you're like,
Yeah?
yes? No, surrender. That's me.
Who's on first? You're not old enough, mate.
No, I'm
You've got no
confused.
idea. Yeah.
I'm not old enough. How many years between us? 2?
5? 4? You're 28, 27?
29 in like a month.
So you're 28. So that's 4 years between.
29 in a month.
Okay.
I'm doing the child thing of
29 in a month?
I'm only 7 months away from my
I'm
next year.
7.5, okay?
For all of you who don't know, that's actually Sol's voice all the time when he's off camera. He just puts this one on
It's true.
for when he's casting.
Gets
But
exhausting.
I can imagine, yeah. Gets exhausting listening to you as well. But let's kick this one off. Game number 2, Poland versus South Korea. Week 2 of Hearthstone Global Games. Even Shaman versus this Q-Block. I feel like we've gone back in time a little bit.
If I could turn back the hands of time, I'd turn them back a lot further than this.
Okay. I thought you were about to quote song lyrics then. I was like,
If I could turn
yeah,
back
and I was like, I'm
time,
not sure what the next line
if I
is.
could find a
There we
way. Yeah. Sorry, but I apologise to everyone's ears. You should not have to be subjected to that. Love a good power ballad, me.
Job's done.
And I get this in person, like I said. Let's take a look at these opening hands, though. Corpse Taker is one that where there's a few minions in this deck that you need to be able to deal with, right? There's the Flame Tongue, there's the Corpse Taker, right? And did you guys hear that?
I have no idea. I was laughing because I just realised that the next line of that song is very appropriate for our relationship. It's I take back all the words that could hurt you.
You'd be a while taking
Yeah,
those
no,
back.
seriously.
You'd be all weekend.
Anyway, Hearthstone. Serious business.
So what Team Korea have to do here is actually be able to defend against the Corpse Taker. If they can't kill it, they're going to start taking a lot of damage.
One of the ways I initially had a lot of success in this matchup, and actually even against Control Warlock, this is, if you guys tuned in to Summer Championships and saw me in full waiter's garb serving a steak to TJ, the reason I ended up with like kind of this erroneous view of the matchup that led to that situation is that the most success I'd had against Voidlord decks with even Shaman was to make a guy and then just stick Earthen Might on it and just keep hitting them with it until they died, which is actually just a very hard situation for them to play around. Because the problem with all of your early board development turns in Even Shaman is they just walk into Defile so perfectly. You know, you look at what Primal Fin Totem does alongside any other totem that you then press and so on. So my success was just one minion, buff it up, make it bigger, hit you, you're dead. That was my plan. Poland, though, do not seem to be going down that path here. And again, the reason I brought it up in response to what you said is I think the reason they might not end up doing that is they can see that Corpse Taker shining, glowing light in the far left of their hand from our perspective and just drawn to it like a moth to flame, because that Corpse Taker Earthen Might combination is savage.
Yeah, there is the 2-turn setup from Korea if they so want it, which is Defile for whatever to take the shield off.
Sure.
And then try and get the Hellfire down. Second Hellfire now, but yes, it will be blocked.
That is a beating.
It will be blocked by the other Might initially, and maybe that's just too much damage as well. Fire Elemental as well. There's nothing to be sniffed at in terms of just pushing 3 and then pressuring 6.
And now I do have to live in a very traumatic world, because this is looking very similar to the game that Glory played that ended up with me losing that bet to TJ. And Hagatha was drawn around this point of the game again, I think, and then Glory's response to that was to actually just not play any minions afterwards, and he just waited until Hagatha and then just played out all his 2-drops. And so I was about to say 1 and 2 drops then, but that's not how the deck works. Played out all his 2-drops, got up a bunch of value out of random spells and won the game that way. That plan, and I'm willing to restate this now, does not work against Q-Block. That's not happening. They will kill you. This is Control Warlock that they were dealing with at the time. Control Warlock back then had way less threats than even Lock does now. You really just had to hex a couple of things and you were just clear. You were just out of the woods at that point.
Yeah. Whereas the multiple list of threats are the 2 Doom Guards, the 2 Faceless, the 2 Cubes into 2 Mountain Giants as well. So that is just too much heat to handle.
This is a big ouchies though right here.
Okay, Falk. This Defile was a good setup though, because it means even with a buff, the Hellfire is going to get the job done, worst case scenario, although.
Yeah, but worst case scenario, you're taking 12 in the meantime as well.
I wonder.
It's not a fun time.
It's not. I'm just working out
Actually,
where 12's come from.
Worst case scenario, you're taking 14.
Not 13?
Hmm?
Oh, right. Hang on. You talk about exactly what's in hand, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. And worst case scenario would be double Earthen Might, right? Or Earthen Might Flame.
Yeah. Okay, so you're actually taking 15 if you have to Hellfire.
Yeah, I was going before that. I said in the meantime, you're taking 12. Then you Hellfire.
I'll let you off. You do have a Shroom Brewer, though. This is also one of the weird issues with Dark Pact is you can see them both in hand there, but because they're only hitting 4, you also don't have that many minions to Dark Pact most of the time, right? You don't actually have stuff. So it's kind of awkward to find those moments. And here's that massive pressure, and like I said, there just needs to be an answer. To Corpse Taker, and right now there hasn't been fast enough, and it's pushed. What's that now? How much damage is that pushed now? So that was 10, so 16?
It's only, this is the first time it's attacked.
Oh, right, you got played last turn. Okay, well, still 10.
Wake up, Raven.
Never.
Job done.
Kobold might look a little bit funny going down to 5, but something needs to be on the board to try and get a Dark Pact off next turn.
Yeah. I mean, with this 2-1 on the board as well, they can actually like play a threat and Dark Pact the small 2-1 on the following turn, which, you know, they would struggle to do that otherwise.
It's very tricky, though. We can see the Fire Elemental is live next turn. So right now, there's no reason not to play the Corpse Taker, because if it's poked and then Hellfired, great, Fire Elemental win the game. Worst case, Spellstone, but you know what? You can't play around Spellstone by not playing minions. You will just lose.
Right.
And give South Korea a window of opportunity to actually heal back up. And the second they stabilize, you've probably lost. That's one of the things even Shaman struggles to do, is recover from a negative board state.
Yes. So now your options are Hellfire, die to Fire Elemental. You can Faceless Manipulator on the
That's why I was just looking
the Corpse Taker, which of course, like, the lifesteal is huge for you in this position, even more so than any of the other effects. But then you're very vulnerable to Hex. You're still quite vulnerable to Earth Elemental and to Fire Elemental in that position. Honestly, like, yeah, the Corpse Takers then trade, but they're still just a whole 6-5 ahead of the game at that point.
I'm not seeing a get out of jail free card here. Next turn, there was the option of Shroom Brewer into Stonehill Defender, but how do you get there safely enough?
Yeah.
Bear in mind, 2 Doomsayers in this list as well. The 2 Spellstones that haven't been picked up. But outside of that, there's not a lot of things that could actually have stopped this happening. I think it's just a very powerful opening from Team Poland with the Corpse Taker into the slightly delayed Corpse Taker. And for the other option, they're just going to play a Doom Guard, kill it off, and say, you know what, this is the way it's going to be right now.
That was brutal as well. They lost the Stonehill Defender and the Shroom Brewer, which, as you mentioned, is most likely going to be their next turn if they got to 7 mana and still were forced to do something defensive. Had 2 copies of Dark Pact in hand, so, you know, had a little redundancy there that one of those could have happily gone away. The Mountain Giant is probably borderline unplayable this game now, the way they're being forced to curve out so aggressively. So, huge low roll from Korea's side on that Doomguard play.
And the benefit is, this Doomguard is nice because it either gets killed somehow, which is going to be a good chunk of their turn, if not all of it. You can see from 2-Tech, he does have Hex and a Vicious Scalebane available. But that's his whole turn. It's done no damage and no big threats as well. So if it's ignored as well, then you get the benefit of a trade maybe into a Dark Pact, Faceless into a Dark Pact. There are options. It's true. It might be just enough for them to hold on.
And they've got a fairly simple backwards counting game right now, which is Gul'dan on 10. What do I do turn 9, turn 8, and turn 7?
Look at this play. I think that felt like a very last minute decision.
It really did.
It looked like they were going to poke face with that totem.
That looked like a very, very serious scramble to me, where they didn't really know what they were doing.
Oh, Portugal fighting back. Japan had a 1-0 lead. Now they are 1-2 down. And Stonehill, anything playable.
I wouldn't recommend Felguard. That seems to make the backwards counting game a little bit more difficult. Do you need it, though? Is the 3-5 taunt and then another taunt that comes back off the Gul'dan later, is that worth the 1 extra turn of delay? Can you find it?
My question is, are you making 3 turns if you don't, right? Like, there's 3 turns is a long time right now. That is a very, very long time to not play a taunt.
Yes.
But I do like to live life on the edge, and I'm wondering whether you can get away with Grizzly. You've just seen a Hex.
Ooh.
It is brave. I've known to be brave sometimes. Nope. South Korea, middle of the road.
Pretty much where I was as well.
The safest plan possible right now.
Yeah.
Ooh. So what this does is this Earthen Might can kill off the Stonehill, but you can't unless you do that on the Vicious Scalehide instead.
Feels like a Fire Rally turn to me.
But you can clear the board and still have Fire Rally on board and Vicious Scalehide for next turn.
And Fire Rally on board?
Sorry, you can still have the Fire Elemental Battle Cry for next turn, and you have a wider, bigger board.
Okay. So you want to Scalehide, Earthen Might, and then what are you? Wait, are you double trading into the Tauren Warrior? Is there something better than that I'm missing? Because that feels horrible.
Hang on. Okay, so I guess you end up leaving either Stonehill or the double trade. Where are you putting the Fire Rally damage? That's my follow-up question. Okay, this is actually okay. This is way better. This was where I was trying to get to.
Okay, this makes sense.
Because the Fire Elemental, if you do 3 damage to the taunt and then it gets killed,
yeah,
you're in the same spot, right? Whereas this, there's 3 minions on board that have to be answered. If it's a Hellfire, well, guess what? The Fire Rally does 3 damage next turn anyway.
We're getting there. Are we getting there?
You want to Dark Pact to Doomsayer?
I was thinking Faceless, the Scale Hide, but it doesn't do anything relevant when it loses the buff on your side of the board is the problem. And then you gain 1 from the lifesteal. You can then Dark Pact that and play a Doomsayer on the board afterwards. Then that gives you a free turn to do whatever you want.
I think you have to do this.
Hellfire, Doomsayer, Dark Pact?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. My play's a lot cuter, but it's nowhere near as safe as this.
What do Poland have anything from that just goes for haste? They have 1 Argent Commander and 2 Fire Elementals and Alakir.
Right.
And wait. No, okay.
Yeah, I think if
they don't have the Kalimos active. Okay.
I think if the Faceless play like retained the buff on the Scale Hide, then that would be a much better play in this situation, right? You kill the Direwolf, you gain 1 extra from the healing. It'd just be so much more secure play.
If they pass, they lose.
If they Dark Pact it, do they lose anyway, though, is the question that you have to ask.
But then they've only got 2 turns.
Right, but like, is 2 turns 1 too many, right? Like, again, obviously, it looks really dumb.
Yeah.
You know, there's a card that they could have been representing as Argent Commander or Fire Ellie or Alakir, like the whole game. Alakir, and if it's Alakir, they go to 6 with the Dark Pact anyway, so they're only playing around the other 2 cards. I think Argent Commander would have been used based on the couple of situation where with Fire Elemental in hand, if they just played the Fire Elemental anyway without the Doomsayer locking them out, that threatens lethal on the following turn anyway, and they don't get the 2 turns.
Yeah, it gives them like small chances to get something, right? So yeah, we'll just carry on the conversation that Poland locked us out of just because they got to win.
Finally, someone found a way to shut me up. I didn't know it was possible.
I need to go. No?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought there was the mute button they used on you.
If they'd have actually just cut to a break again as you did that. Yeah.
Would have been perfect. We'll try that for next time. But we're going to move on in the rest of the series as well. We can see what's coming up. It's going to be the Warrior versus the Shaman. And for South Korea, the Shaman is the Shudderwock. It isn't any of this even malarkey that Poland are trying out, although they did get a win with. It's going to be a genuine Shudderwock list. Nothing too crazy to cry out with, except for the fact that they play Hemet.
Which is pretty helpful in a matchup that's going to be down to racing, although it's tricky to use, and this is the kind of matchup that illustrates my personal problem with Hemet, because Shudderwock is a puzzle piece deck, right? It's a puzzle piece deck, obviously, because you're assembling a bunch of pieces that then make 1 card win the game for you, but it's also, some games you'll be looking at the board state and think, okay, I'm going to need a healing rain to win this game. Sometimes you'll be looking at a board state and thinking, I'm going to need a mind control tech to win this game. Right. And that's where Hemet becomes very awkward. And as you saw previously, this is a matchup where a healing rain can be a big help to you, let alone 4 of them. So if you are forced to Hemet and get yourself in a position where you just, you turbo your Shudderwock and blow up potentially useful cards to yourself, it can become a little bit problematic, but it's still a good position for the Shaman to be in. Yeah, and I will say, looking at these opening hands as we go into game number 3, this is looking pretty decent overall for South Korea here. Is a Manatide, the Keleseth on curve, and the Farsight as well. It's actually not bad at all. I imagine the card being thrown away there, but all of this coming together seems pretty nice, to be honest. On the other hand, Poland, apart from that singular Acolyte of Pain, the double Warpath, it's just not what you need, is it? It's not what you're after. Not particularly. Although this is a Keleseth game, so they might just have to relieve a little bit of pressure off themselves if Sunni's able to pick up chain gangs and so on in the near future. But A83650 is a player that we have learnt more and more about very recently, because originally we didn't know much about him apart from he had a name that sounded like a road in Britain between Shoreditch and Bethnal Green. Outside of that, we really didn't have much at all. And then, he gave a great interview after he qualified for championships where he talked about the origins of his name and said, I didn't think I'd become famous, but then I did, which is just a great line. And then from there, of course, he had a fantastic showing, obviously, at championships and his eventual route through. So he is now very much the shining light of this Polish team, I would say. Yeah, he was one of the players I spoke to from that team in regards of their approach to this week. And one of the things they did mention, which was pretty funny, is A8 was just like, yeah, we think one of the issues Korea has in this match is that the Rogue's just not very well built. It's just a bad deck. It's like, wow, brave words. Hey, I know you're famous, but brave words. I am inclined to agree with the young man. I was a little bit confused looking at the list as well, because there's kind of some anti-mage tech in there with like the Aquatic Adventurer and the Shadow Step. I mean, you can say if you want that like Questing Shadow Step is just the right build now if you really want to, but they're good cards against Mage. But then personally, I'm a big advocate of Auctioneer against Mage rather than Sprint, because Sprint can quite often just blow too many 4/4s onto the board at the same time, whereas Auctioneer is just a threat that you can just play and it's just in isolation good enough. But they've got the questing package with sprints in their deck as opposed to alongside Auctioneer, which did confuse me a little bit as well. So yeah, not too surprised to see Poland and A8 pointing that deck out specifically. Yeah. The Hunter deck though, mwah, on point.
I mean, it's South Korea, isn't it? You know, it's going to be good. But I will say one of the first people I saw play Cube Hunter and not the Recruit Hunter with Seeping Oozlings was Kranich.
Oh.
Honestly, literally the first player I saw who tweeted the list. So
is it because you watch Kranich's stream all the time if it's on?
Maybe, but I didn't see anyone else tweet it.
Okay.
So, you know, we'll see. But we see the power now of this Keleseth. I mean, you could think, what does Keleseth really do in a Shudderwock deck, right? It's a puzzle piece. Keleseth is often not part of that puzzle. Well, this is what it does. It makes everything just that little bit bigger, that little bit more annoying to kill. And also, some games you can actually become the beatdown if you play a game like this. If this wasn't against Quest Warrior, it was against, you know, just most of the decks, to be completely honest, you just beat them down. There's just nothing they can do.
Sure. And this Acolyte in particular is just massively obnoxious in this position. There's no way to activate it without it drawing one card. If you throw away an Execute, well, you've thrown away an Execute to an Acolyte of Pain that's also already drawn one card. But most importantly, it's stopping you doing your own Acolyte Warpath stuff, which you really want to do, because this is a race matchup. It's about turboing through your deck as quickly as you can and getting to your win condition before your opponent who's trying to do the exact same thing while you essentially ignore each other. Like,
but this is about as interacting as it gets.
Yeah, like, Shaman and Warrior basically play this matchup with their back turned to each other, just shuffling through their decks and occasionally glancing back to see what the other one's doing.
Yeah, to make sure none of them pulled a sword on each other or something.
Yeah. Actually, that's what it is. They've selected their dueling pistols, and then the whole matchup is them just taking the 10 steps away from each other, and then they turn and fire.
Right. It's pretty accurate, actually.
That analogy is money.
And I came up with it, as always. That's what people miss, isn't it, right? You say all the smart stuff.
Yeah.
I give you the fuel for the fire, though. I'm always there when you come up with something smart. It can't be a coincidence.
Raven continuing to try and take credit for my genius.
You can just admit I'm your muse. Okay, so you can just,
my muse, of all words.
You can admit that.
Of all words, you went with muse.
Yeah. Glacial Shard normally a very frustrating battle cry to deal with in this deck when you're minion focused. Less so here, because the taunts you're playing just to prop the quest anyway, you're not really too fussed about them hitting. It helps, but it's not the end of the world. And also, cards like Acolyte of Pain, well, you can cycle those yourself. You don't need for them to be able to swing and attack. So it's more of a frustration than just getting them down on the board. And also, the Keleseth buff, it's a 3/2.
The Acolyte remains a problem, though. And these Executes, you know, I talked about just the obvious bad feeling of this Acolyte's already drawn cards and then you're going to execute it. It's just, you know, Trump teachings will tell you that's not a good value exchange right off the surface. But furthermore, as a matchup consideration, your Brawls, your Warpaths, and your Executes are amazing tools in the late game to force damage through to face. So you don't get into that scenario that we saw in our community show Top 5 Plays recap, where it's just hero power hitting a totem over and over and over and over.
There's also sometimes where if Shudderwock does whiff, all you need to do is kill those Shudderwocks, and then you win more or less.
Brawl and then execute the last.
Yeah, and then you're just like, well, I'm just way safer now.
Right.
You know, that win condition's gone out the window. I mean, it happens, right? It's not like that's super fringe. Like, there are a lot of times when Shudderwocks whiff. We've seen it about 1 million times already in this tournament.
Yep. I honestly think I've seen more failed Shudderwocks in this tournament than like my competitive Shudderwock casting cumulative to this point.
It's probably reasonable.
Yeah.
So now looking at some of those smaller intricacies, I imagine we're going to see Coin Zola. Do you have any big queries with that? Because one of the biggest things you want to do is duplicate these Battlecry effects, and probably the biggest one for consistency is Saradine.
I mean, I agree with you. I think Coinzola is a very good play here, but if you're asking for me to generate concerns, it's that Korea might feel they're so far ahead here that they can even just wait the whole time until Zola Grumble combination.
Okay.
And then have the the definite rebuy of the failed Shudderwock with the 1-mana Zola at the end.
It does mean, yeah, like you phrased it quite well, but worst case scenario, you end up with a 1-mana Zola, right, with that Grumble combo. So worst case, it's always Shudderwock, 1-mana Zola, go again.
Yes.
Just to explain the interaction.
Yeah, and I think also in the past I've erroneously described that as just you being back in the same position. It's not quite true because you played another Zola effect. So
yeah,
the chances of the next Shudderwock whiffing actually go down as you continue down that path.
And this is what, honestly, like, a lot of people jump to the, no, Shudderwock, it just kills you. It's actually one of the most intricate decks to try.
Sorry, whose voice was that?
Everybody.
Okay.
Literally everyone that isn't me and you right now.
Me and Raven against the world, let's go!
Yeah, and let's go with Shudderwock's drawn as well. But honestly, it has so many small intricacies. Like we said, Coinzola, pretty good player right there.
Yeah.
Being able to make the decision to hold off is a good judgment call. But those calls change in every matchup throughout every single game as well.
Turn by turn
Stuff, yeah.
as well. You have to react to the hand, you have to react to how much pressure your opponent generates on you, you have to react to the context of your hand, how full or empty it is, whether there's particular overload cards that you want to get out of your hand before you Shudderwock to make space, but then of course you have to do that on turn 7 or 8, you're not doing it on turn 9,
also,
going into turn 10.
The call to Shudderwock as well, because sometimes, guess what, Zola's at the bottom, or Grumble's at the bottom, you know, sometimes you just miss it, right? And then the call has to be, do I just Shudderwock now and take what I can get? Or do I hold on even longer? All of these decisions make you go from a good deck to a great deck in the right player's hands. And there's 4 good players handling this one.
Sure is. Suni again going back to this Zola consideration. I think this is different this turn because they don't really have anything else to do. Gluttonous Ooze is just too powerful in the matchup in terms of buying extra turns in the late game if it comes to it. To think about playing this turn, so it's either spend 3 mana on Zola or just get a totem on the board, which is borderline irrelevant now, and if it tends away from irrelevant, it tends towards being detrimental, not good for you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you've noticed there's not many hero powers been played this game, and there won't be in most control matchups, because look at the hand already. Now imagine if those base totems get bounced to your hand. Shudderwock might go bye-bye a little bit later on, you know, in these Grumble circumstances. It's very dangerous.
I like the Poland are playing Battle Rage in their Quest Warrior, by the way.
You just love that card, don't you?
I do. It's a card that has a lot of good memories for me, just in terms of like the deck that I have connected with most is very synonymous with Battle Rage, but I also just like it in Quest Warrior. I think it's potentially a mistake in most metagames to not be playing the copy of Battle Rage, because how many times does Quest Warrior appear on screen and we say, well, this is just a turbo quest matchup. You know, this is just play your taunts, play Stonehill, take a 1-mana taunt from the Stonehill, turbo it out as fast as you can, hope you draw Phantom Militia. Well, Battle Rage is the best card you can play in Warrior for enabling that situation.
Yeah, it only really gets better, right? It's fine as is, but can only improve. And we saw just quickly then that Portugal actually, you know, after taking that one loss early on against Japan, actually went 3-0 with them. So they're taking a win. And to be honest, after what happened last week, thank God. You know, they had a pretty crazy series and a mess of a few games. And it's good to just get a win on the board then. They're going to be 1-1 now.
Yep. Yeah, I think perhaps a little hard done by in that series overall. I think they played well in the games that they won, but just in the end, like the matchups just didn't play out for them and ended up, I believe, losing that series 3-2 to New Zealand, if I'm on the right track here. Yeah, that's what happened, right?
And I believe New Zealand beat Sweden earlier on as well, if my sources are to be believed.
If my little birds.
Because I'm the big bird.
Wait, you're Big Bird?
Reveal.
Is this Sesame Street now?
What a win.
You want to play the counting game? 1 Shudderwock!
That's it if you're playing, if you're New Zealand.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
That is a lot of Saturday chain gangs, which is important. And already, like 3 out of 7. It should be done by now if you're living in a good world as the Warrior. And this Mana Tide, is that 3 cards that's drawn now?
Yeah, I think it's 3. I think it's
right?
3, might be 4, but yeah. I think Poland are actually moderately comfortable with leaving it alive here. They haven't wanted to commit this second warpath to deal with it. I mean, they're not happy about leaving it alive, but there's things that you can tell yourself to make yourself feel better about it, which is...
I know all about those.
that's the hours of 11 p.m. to midnight of Raven every night as he rocks himself to sleep. But you can, if you don't want a warpath, you don't want to brawl in this scenario, right? Because their board clears for after the quest gets activated, so you can force damage through. And then you can kind of have that chat with your teammates of, well, if their hand's really full all the time, that makes their life a little bit more awkward. But without Hagatha in play, that's not really anything to cling to. You know, we've seen the mess that Hagatha creates, but it's very, very exclusive to Hagatha because it replaces itself when you try and play minions.
Yeah, and also they've not even seen Grumble yet, so you could say, well, this board state's good for me as well, because if you Grumble back all this, they're not going to get a Shudderwock. Well, they've not even played Grumble yet, so
sure.
you lose him without that happening at this point. Not bad. 1 mana, 4/4, deal 3, heal 3.
That was kind of bars.
Oh, you've not heard me take these things seriously, Saul. I just let you be the guy who thinks he's cool, but really,
What?
really, that could be a rapper if I want.
It's all coming out now.
Okay.
I think we should borrow Spain's psychologist to evaluate the relationship between us.
I think they quit their profession after that. We may break them. Let's go up to 6 out of 7 now. The wonders of Phantom Militia as a card means you can really get that quest done. And to be honest, I think mainly the reason why Quest Warrior is even a decent deck right now is because of Phantom Militia.
Yeah, no, I think, I think
without that, I mean...
Stonehill and Militia, right? Those are the cards. This is a good turn to Glacial Shard from South Korea, because of course 6 out of 7 on the quest means that Poland can go 7 out of 7, equip the weapon, swing the weapon hero power quite easily. Glacial Shard, of course, prevents that, which means the hero power has numerous bad targets on the board. Poland can't pick and choose one to snipe down with the weapon.
Does this have to be Warpath right now? Because this is starting to be a lot of damage.
Yeah.
It's that tough moment where you have to decide, is this too much or or an okay amount of damage to take? Because you have upsides, like we said, if you Shudderwock and then there's bounce effects, then it might just whiff, and then there's a problem. But they're nowhere near Shudderwock yet because they've not seen Grumble.
So, like Dry Whisker, Warpath, Battle Rage, and then Warpath some more is something that jumps out to me as a possibility.
Are they worried about not getting the taunt? Probably not, right? It's just, if you brought the quest and get the weapon, well, guess what? Hero power's going to miss anyway, right? You know, delaying it a turn is kind of the same right now. It hasn't gone for the Warpath, though, and just gone to get the taunt down, so it did squeeze in the turn. Okay, but I don't know. This looks a little bit scary to me. We can also see a 1 mana Hex, which changes a few things as well, of course.
Yeah, they're almost certainly going to have a Hex at this point. And
8 cards left.
Yeah, 1 mana or 4 mana, you know, not a big deal at this point because they're not going to be making huge tempo plays behind this. I guess a 4 mana Hex there couldn't be a Grumble turn alongside it, where this would actually be a really nice Grumble turn for South Korea because it's the first time there's a big minion in play. Because there's actually too much stuff on board to Grumble, right? They don't want to be in that position. So with the big taunt, they could trade off, pick and choose which minions that they don't want to be hanging around, and then go for the Hex Grumble with the discounted Hex if it was available.
Look at this, they're just pushing. You know, all the army you got, mate. It's gone. So we might see the trademark warrior turn next turn, which is going to be the brawl weapon hero power turn. Just to get some of this damage going. This is what we highlighted yesterday in the community show, where for Russia Federation, they had the board empty, so to speak, with hero power in, but every single turn the Shaman would just create a totem or create 1 minion, and they missed, and they lost because they had no pressure. And that's the biggest problem.
Was that worth a totem, by the way? Pressing the 1/1 at the end of, obviously 0-2 3/4 of the time, but was it worth being there? Just Phil, I mean, I was looking at this exact scenario, right, where you really want like the 4/4 or the 3/2 to win, because then it like pushes more damage.
They just knew they were going to get it, right?
I guess. I mean, I guess in the long run, damage to the Warrior's face is like borderline irrelevant. You really don't care. And if the brawl turn happens, you know it doesn't matter what lives. And 4 damage to face as opposed to 1 damage to face. Like, it's the same thing, the way this game's going to play out. Right,
and also,
right?
they're not even close to doing their Grumble things with Shudderwock, right? Is this where Hemet has to come down?
There's still that second Healing Rain in there, though. This is what I've been talking about. Healing Rains are really good cards in this matchup.
But does getting to Grumble and Shudderwock quicker negate the need for Healing Rain?
That's the question. I think it's a great point to raise, and I think that is exactly what Korea will be discussing at this point. The fact that there is potentially just Life Drinker Ooze this turn, which is looking like a very solid turn. I think you can maybe give yourself one more turn before you hem it and just try and find the 1 in 6 out of there. Because if
that's a pretty good health swing, actually, to be fair.
Right.
Isn't it?
And if the 1 in 6 is Healing Rain, fantastic. If the 1 in 6 is Grumble, you probably don't need to hem it anymore. You can just do your Grumble business. If it's Saronite, same kind of deal, you know?
No, I can get behind that. It's a pretty decent health swing. And it's 2 minions on the board versus 1, which means the hero power is more awkward for Team Poland.
Now, I think you see Korea here considering exactly what they're going to grumble in this game. You saw in the previous series that we watched, there are some merits to getting additional copies of Life Drinker in the matchup, because one of the difficult things to do can be to play your first Shudderwock without dying. If you don't get the Grumble bounce, if you get the Zola bounce instead, you can only play 1 Shudderwock, which means if you heal for 6, it's very possible that Quest Warrior sets up 2-turn lethal against you through that, since they have so much explosive damage available to them.
Yeah, especially because lack of Hagatha so far means that you can play minions and they probably live if they're playing Shudderwock, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't play Shudderwock, sweet, 1 more turn without Shudderwock. So it's kind of a win-win situation without Hagatha Battlecry being live. Finally, the Warpath that's been in the game since turn 1. Looks like it might be being used just to clear these up and guarantee 8 to face. And this is something that, again, from yesterday, Russia Federation could not do in the clip from last week. They could not clear the minions and go face, which is why they lost. But Poland do see that, yes, 8 damage to face is super important. The pressure's super important. And they must know by now that South Korea just don't have Grumble. Right. Because it just would have been played in multiple turns. Right. Okay. Hemet's looking pretty cool right now.
Yeah, that worked out perfectly. And I'm not just saying that because it worked out exactly as I described it on the previous
literally what
turn.
you want, right?
Yeah.
How many cards are going to take out? Was that 2? It's 5, right? I think they're at.
They're at 5, yeah.
Whole lot of nothing.
The remaining cards are now, remaining cards are now Saronite, Hag, and Grumble, I believe. He's played 2 Saronites, but 1 was Zola's, right? I think.
Let me
in the
investigate
spot that we're in.
Still investigating.
Okay. In the meantime, A8 finds himself with a 7/7 staring at him in the face, an Execute in hand, and no Execute activator. And that's a feels bad man.
Right. I was tracking where the Farsights were, but it was Hex and the Life Drinker, right?
Yes.
Right. That was the one card I thought.
Well, they would have been blown up anyway.
Oh, of course, yeah.
That was a giant waste of time, wasn't it?
You had it covered. Just perusing the list.
Yeah. Taking a minute. Just letting me solo cast for a bit. Why not?
Played straight into Hagatha.
So now the Rage does come into play. Just picks up the 2.
Oh.
8 goes to face, though.
I'm almost out of cards.
There's Hag. There's Saronite. Grumble, last card. Looks like a pretty straightforward turn to me, though. Okay. There's actually an argument to just double Healing Rain right now, because you might never Healing Rain again for the rest of the game.
I wonder.
Right, there's a world where you Saronite double Healing Rain this turn, you only gain 5 off the second one, but then, actually you could trade and then gain more off the second one, but still, then on the next turn, if you have a Saronite live, you're going to Grumble and replay another Saronite. But then you'd still have 3 mana left.
Yeah, I think you'll still float
anyway.
3.
Yeah, no, okay, I take it all back.
So you should. Yeah, I think you'd be a little bit over.
But what if both Saronites live?
Great.
I think it's worth thinking about, honestly.
Volcano twice, let's go.
It's not as dumb as it sounds, I promise.
Well, that's what I tried to say to you when I'm casting. You just say, no, of course it is. doesn't work when I say it.
But it's different strokes for different folks, Raven. Your stuff is often quite dumb.
Wow. In a lovable, funny way, right?
Of course.
Okay, good.
You are my muse, after all.
I do enjoy the fact that you questioned my use of word, but never really denied it. So, you know.
I've been trying to deny you taking credit for my entire career for like 4 years now, and
It's true.
you haven't stopped.
Look, I agreed to 40%, I think was the last one.
No, I was still trying to get you down to like 18 at the time. We never settled.
You're trying to get me down to 80.
18.
The problem now for Team Poland is it's edging towards checkmate, right? Because they see there's one card left in the deck.
Yeah.
The Sirenite's there, Helmet's already done. So actually, A8 just knows all the cards next turn. Knows every single card that's available.
Yep.
There is no mystery whatsoever. As Haggath has not been played, just the Ro48.
Nice little raptors. Nice little raptors.
Something Raptors.
Imagine if it just wasn't Grumble, they just forgot to put it in the list. And they're like, oh no.
Can we get an admin?
Sorry guys, we have Shudderwock to proc a Haggath spell and that's it, let's go.
Yeah. By the way.
Hero power?
I'm weak once more.
Actually, still now we're in double Saronite world, you can still theoretically play one Chain Gang and Healing Rain and then one Chain Gang and Shudderwock next turn. It does still limit like the full heal with your Shudderwock on the following turn. But again, this was a possibility, right? And now this Healing Rain's just not going to get cast.
Is that a huge problem though?
I mean, it's we're dealing with a game that was very much won, so I'm living in min-max world, right? Basically, like, you know, tiny percentages of improvement, and I think the Healing Rain may have been a point of consideration for South Korea.
Interesting. Dr. Grumble, just getting ready for the next expansion.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Like, I wonder whether you're ever under that much pressure once the Shudderwock follow-up happens anyway. Is the issue with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue with any of those points. Again, it's a super minor thing, which is just me reaching for things to focus on.
If you were looking around below 18, then yeah, they'll be a little bit worried because that 2 hero powers plus a couple of minion attacks can just end the game right there. But I think 25 is a very solid number. And now I, quite honestly, just don't really know what Poland have to do right now. They just hope Shudderwock misses, which is incredibly difficult with the cards that are on board that they can't clear.
Yeah.
They just have to go for the like. Interesting.
I'm okay with this. They recognize that. So follow through what you just said, right? Which is if they're going to win the game, they need the Shudderwock to miss. If the Shudderwock misses, they can just play the fatigue game plan from here anyway. They don't need the hero powers. Right. So yeah, this is totally fine.
I was just for a split second, I was like, they're not killing the Grumble.
Right,
but
which of course was necessary that turn.
Because if Grumble's on the board and you play Shudderwock, you guarantee a replay of Grumble to bring a Shudderwock back for 1 mana no matter what.
Yeah.
So that is a 100% state. So yes, the Grumble did have to get killed right there. And I was just for a split second worried that they weren't going to, but they did. So absolutely fine for Poland.
And now South Korea have these 2 Saronites on board, which is shutting down one of their Zola options to pull their Shudderwock back to hand, essentially just increasing their failure rate a little bit.
Yeah.
So they're trying to consider, you know, when exactly do these Saronites die? If we wait it out, can we afford to wait it out? They definitely can afford to wait it out to an extent now because the Die Insect hero power is gone, which just gives them a lot more time now.
That's true. I do wonder, is it ever offset? I'm not good with the numbers on that. Is it offset by the fact that they've just played more Saronites, that there's 2 on the board? Do you know what I mean?
What do you mean? I mean
there's more Saronite battle cries, so there's going to be more Shudderwocks that Zola may grab instead of the 2 Sarenites.
Yes.
That sounds very confusing, but you know what I mean,
That
right?
is true, but still, the best opportunity would be to have nothing on the board.
Yes.
That's still
100%, I agree. Yeah. It was just for a moment there where there's only more Sarenites because you played extra, which is good for the Shudderwock.
Which is good news, everyone.
Yeah. But yes, for want of one turn, they're on 29. They're not dying next turn. It's fine.
For Poland, the equation is now simple. Set up for Korea to fail.
Even that's going to be difficult, right? You just rely on fatigue at this point because you know they have volcanoes. So none of your minions do it. You just know they don't do anything, right? You can't even play one wave to force a volcano and then another wave because, I mean, I guess you could play 3 Phantom Militias and say,
Is play
hey.
nothing just the plan? Because you want to value your minions. You don't want them getting like damaged by the Hagatha.
Yeah, you know the Hagatha ability is going to go off. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think their plan is you're on fatigue and we're not. Fingers crossed. You know,
Yeah, no,
it sounds really stupid, but
good luck, God bless. So
yeah, I think
game's out of our hands at this point.
Yeah. It's weird, isn't it? It's like they're going for triple Phantom Militia. So what they're doing now is saying, well, these should survive on 1. I can push some damage, and then if Shudderwock fails, then you need to Volcano. Then I can play 2 Dark Reapers.
All right, it is time to walk the Casbah. And there we go.
Yep.
Chain Gang, GG.
Yep, that's going to be game straight away.
It was kind of anticlimactic after all the all the fails we've seen recently.
It's Chain Gang and he likes it.
Not even close.
What? It's just cadence. Wait, what are the lyrics?
The lyrics are Poland have just conceded, and it is 2 games to 1 to Korea, but due to the unique and wonderful way that Shudderwock animations still function, Korea's turn is still playing out. You can see the desync between the 2 players' positions right now.
And as well, I will just note, especially in that first play of Shudderwock, you saw how many Shudderwocks were created in total, and that was because they generated extra chain gangs. So, you know, 3 tips here for Shudderwock players potentially is that if you can bounce the Sarenites and replay them, things like that happen and make you incredibly unlikely to actually whiff.
Yeah, and you saw the huge difference there between what Korea were able to do and what happened in the previous series because of how slow the start was by comparison in this series. In the previous series, we saw the Warrior actually get pressure going. They had Taunt minions down, they were chipping away with damage, and they had, I believe, a turn 8 quest completion. At that point, the Shudderwock Shaman can't afford to just go, okay, chain gang, wait for my Zola, wait for my Grumble,
hang on.
more chain gangs, okay, now we're good. Like, they had to scramble for this position, Slovakia did, I believe it was, had to scramble for a position where they were just playing Life Drinkers multiple times to make sure they could stabilize enough with the Shudderwock. And of course, that's just a lower percentage win condition. It's a higher percentage failure rate for the Shudderwock in the end. And you know, that's kind of what that deck becomes about after a certain amount of turns have passed, and it's the reason why a lot of people just kind of look down on the deck and frown upon it a bit. But I think it's a very interesting dynamic in the game, and it's a very clear Hearthstone training tool, right?
It really is.
Increase your percentages, make your outs as good as they can be. That's Hearthstone.
And when you see a turn where you can actually just coin Zola or Saronite, a great turn in any Shudderwock game, and they didn't do it, and it's fine. You know, like those are the calls.
More time, more information.
Those are the calls you have to make. But that game's over. Let's check out what's next. As we can see coming up for the rest of this series, it's going to be the Hunter from Doido versus the Rogue from Surrender. Oh, we get to see my boy Surrender play. And also go against this, or should I say, play with this Rogue list that Poland have kind of said it's just not good. It's just a bad list.
Apparently so, yeah. And the Hunter list from Poland, that's actually very similar to the one that I said I liked from Korea as well. The difference being they've cut 1 tracking and added in an extra Void Ripper as well on top of that. So they're still playing the 2 Loot Hoarders, still got the Stitch Tracker, and then it's -1 tracking and the Void Ripper.
Are they playing Mossy Horror?
No.
Right, okay. Might be a bit going too deep in the tank if you play Mossy Horror and the Void Ripper, as one of the benefits is you can proc your own egg. But yeah, I'm kind of excited for this one because on one hand, I've got Surrender playing, who I just love watching. I think he's one of the best players in the world. I may have mentioned this once or twice, but also it's going to be against this Hunter deck, and I could watch this Hunter deck for many more weeks yet. Probably I'll happily watch it till the expansion comes out.
You're just delighted to have a Hunter deck in the game that's actually interesting, right?
Yes!
Yeah.
I loved Hunter when it wasn't interesting. Imagine my joy now when, like, there were so many decisions. We talked about it. We were sat playing this list, and it was me, Sol, and Falk were playing it. And a lot of the time, we had different opinions on the plays. There was a lot to talk about most turns on how to approach matchups as well as singular turns. And I'll be completely honest, that's not really something Hunter's had, or at least had for a very long time at least. And it's kind of cool that they've found a way to, or at least we as players have found a way to make this class like very intricate and one of the most intricate decks right now in the meta.
Yeah, I mean, we disagreed on a lot of things. You know, we had plays like, oh, do we Argus this minion and pre-bump into this? Like, how important is it to keep a Death Rattle activator alongside the egg in this matchup? Because they're probably going to knock it open anyway. Am I keeping tracking? When am I casting tracking? Do I wait for more information?
What do you even pick from tracking?
Exactly,
most of the time?
And we kept ending games and then going back to the replay tools and reanalyzing what we all wanted to do, and then eventually coming to the conclusion that I was right.
Not always. I talked about playing Hyman and hitting them in the face. How many times can I be wrong? Let's be honest.
It's just every turn, every play. If there was a high main involved, Raven's like, play high main, go face.
Right. I mean, how weird does it have to be to go? So we could play high main, or we could do something else.
This leads very nicely into the matchup that we have, though, because it's Miracle Rogue that comes up against the deck. And one of our most hotly contested turns was the threat of Sap against Savannah High Main, where Falk and I wanted to play around it, and you wanted to coin a high main and go face.
Look, sapping a high main on 6, great turn. But what if they sapped it on 5? Then you can play it on 6 like it's a normal game, right?
He's ignoring the simple fact that there was a Hench Clan thug on the board already. So, like, Sap would have killed us.
In all seriousness, though, I do believe, honestly, however silly this sounds and however much you want to like take the mick out of me, but against Miracle Rogues, sometimes that high main has to stick, and if it doesn't, guess what? You lose. If it was any other minion, guess what? You lose.
No, I think sometimes you don't have a choice and you just have to go for it. I think, and the choices that we had on this theoretical turn that you guys know nothing about, that we keep talking about.
We should have just like recorded it all. Like.
The choices that we had were very hidden, and it goes back to how like complex the deck is to play. It took us, what, 15 minutes in HS Replay?
Maybe even longer.
For me to find a play that you guys were happy was like better in the world where they had Sap than what we were doing. I mean, okay, I am still stroking my own ego. I'm lying.
I only admitted to if it was the correct play in the 100% they have Sap. That's all I'm admitting to. If you think they might not have it, high main.
Sure.
Go.
But again, it's kind of the dynamic of the matchup. And to break it down in more detail, if the Hunter can explode onto the board wide, then it's game over, right? The rogue can't interact with, a Terrascale Stalker and a Cube Minion and a 5/5. So if you can work towards that position, it's game, because there's no Vanish or any nonsense like that they can deal with. If you're just getting into positions where, you're just playing an egg and then you're just waiting some time, you make 1/5/5, they can kill your 1/5/5, then you have to make a cube play, then they sap your cube, all this kind of nonsense. If it's like one by one, piece by piece, Rogue can pick it apart while tempoing with the Cold Bloods, with the Hench Clan thugs, and that's when you get into trouble.
Yeah, the biggest issue is very much on the Hunter to make something happen, and Rogue excels at not letting you make things happen, right? Even if you played egg and they just sap it, well, that's a disaster. So everything's just a turn late. And that's if you've drawn well. If you've not drawn well, replay the egg, pass. There's now a 0/3, oh no. And then, okay, you cube an egg. Great, you get 5/5. Then they just sap the cube, and you say, give me another 10 minutes to get a minion on the board, and then we'll talk. And it's, like you said, though, it's incredibly hard if the rogue gets any form of stall off. But the second Hunter does get something on the board or sticks something. Oof. They need a few Valspines for that. Those minions get very awkward to deal with.
They do. Valspine actually becomes one of the weaker cards because outside of that 5/5, there's not really great targets for it, right? Like, you're not Valspining Kathrena. You're not
a Grizzly. That's about
sure.
it.
Yeah, I'm for Grizzly. Witchwood Grizzly is the best target in the deck, but when it comes down to obviously eggs and cubes and high mains and Kathrena, Vile Spine Slayer is not the card you want. Sap is really where you want to be at, which is, again, a nice dynamic to have because we're in a meta game and have been for quite some time where Vile Spine has just felt like almost a universally stronger card.
It's just always
in a lot
good,
of positions,
right?
yeah.
And let's talk about it now because Faldori, Strider, Sap, and Vile Spine are in the opening hand for Surrender. And Dorito has a high main, the Stitch Tracker, Hunter's Mark, and a Tracking. A lot of debate. Do you keep tracking turn 1? It draws, I'm doing like weird air quotes right now, 3 cards, but you get to pick one and throw the others away. So it's a deeper draw. My natural response, because I know we literally were talking about this morning, I would just throw Tracking, because I want the 1 draw, and I might draw Tracking later. Cool.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I like would autopilot this of, well, no, I throw Tracking because I don't want to have it right now. I want it later when it's more important.
Yes.
I do understand the argument of saying Tracking for an egg, though. It gives you 3 chances instead of 1.
I was going to lead in and talk about Surrender's Mulligan, Korea's Mulligan a little bit, because Faldori Strider, of course, is a great card to have in the matchup. Like we said, it's all about tempo, so making sure you have a 4-drop to play and draw out some spiders from your deck is important. But how important is it to go even faster than that was my question. Like, are you looking for Firefly Coldblood? Are you looking for Hench Clan Thug? Like, that kind of world?
Yeah, so those cards are super important because one of the other weaknesses outside of things like Sap, which we've talked a lot about, is most aggro decks go way faster than you. You can't really keep up with them, especially this list. It doesn't run Tar Creeper. It doesn't run those defensive tools that some of the Recruit Hunters and still some of the Cube Hunters do run. My worry is, and this is where I feel like the deck, especially this Death Rattle deck, gets tricky to play and play against, is when you presume your opponent is good at the game.
Okay.
Because on ladder, if you play an egg and you have a Death Rattle activator, you probably just play the egg on 3, activate 4. Against these guys, I would be worried that they just sap it on 3, and then you can't do the same, say if it's Terror Scale. You have to think about your turns. And it gets really tricky when you know that they will know how to play against this very tricky deck.
Loot Hoarder off the top like an absolute mad lad. And then there the curve is coming together. Loot Hoarder was the pick off Tracking, throwing away Highmane and Witchwood Grizzly, which you can see, like the laughter right now from Poland is because the reason that pick was made by Poland is that it's super important that they found that egg on 3. So they wanted to play the Loot Hoarder to get themselves in the extra position to be able to do that. Now that they drew the egg on 3, they've essentially burned a Highmane and a Witchwood Grizzly out of their deck for very little reason, because this Loot Hoarder is super low impact now.
Backstab's pretty big.
Backstab SI is huge as well, because you can then 5-3, you can contest a 5-3 with a 3-3.
Yeah, like Backstab's the big deal, especially because of the SI, and also it just means that the Faldori Strider even just becomes way more secure. There's not going to be 2 5/5s popping on the board, and this is what I'm talking about, where the deck's super awkward to play against people who know how to play against it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of players on ladder would ignore that.
No, sure, and
I'm
sure there's a non-zero amount of viewers watching right now who are, you know, more casual players, have maybe never even really seen this deck, that thinking, what? Like, why have you just given your opponent a 5/5 that they didn't have at the start of the turn? But the explanation to that is that you give them 1 5/5 because then that's all the 5/5s they can make. Whereas if you leave the egg there, they can make 2, 3, 4 over the course of the game before you've been able to deal with it.
Yeah, and this is also one of the tricky parts with Dorito's playing Team Poland right now. Once this has happened, how do you then sort of space out your Death Rattle activators when you don't have a Death Rattle to activate?
Right.
Do you just play Terror Scale this turn? It's just a 3-mana 3/3. It's not the worst card in the world. Do you instead Loot Hoarder Weapon? You know, Weapon Hero Power? Like, what do you want to do? Because this Loot Hoarder is just dead to the dagger. It just is.
Yeah.
So this board can just be cleared right now, and a Faldori Strider there. And this is when you start to run into the issues of the Hunter deck not being able to stick a Death Rattle.
I do like this play, though. The only reason, I think, to play Terror Scale Stalker there is to contest Faldori Strider a little bit better on the following turn. But by the Loot Hoarder Candleshot play, they do the same thing anyway. They've got 1 damage front-loaded with the Candleshot, and then they have Flanking Strike sat back in hand. So there's no real benefit there for me, personally, to play a 3/3 instead of the Loot Hoarder with the position that they had. But now South Korea's hand is very dry at this position.
It is. I do think that Faldori from South Korea's point of view, of course, if they trade the Faldori into something, Shadow Step into Valspine. You know, I'm talking about if Hunter have a huge turn, which on 4 they often don't. You can just kill something with Valspine and buy time until the sprint becomes active. Because once sprint's active, it gets very, very difficult indeed. This flanking shot, though, flanking strike, sorry, very powerful response.
Yes, they were in a great spot against Helmmaster Shaw, for example, and in a terrible spot against flanking strike, which is what they ended up running into, because that basically deactivates their whole hand now. I'm not even going to bring it up, Raven.
What?
That they're sprints and not auctioneers. At least if they were auctioneers, you could play a 3-4 into a 4-4 here with this hand and fight for the board.
Right, what I was holding my breath to say is I think they're just playing a 3-4 no matter what this turn.
Right.
You cannot just pass. Like, you give them so much time. And again, the 3-4, okay. Are you okay throwing the Valspine away to stop the 3-3 and one weapon hit? You know what? I am. Because otherwise, like, you get weird things where then Poland can just cube the 3-3, which sounds dumb, but when you have Play Dead and Terror Scale next turn, unless that cube gets sapped, you can create a board, you build your own Spellstone.
I don't think I'd ever cube this 3-3 in this position as the Hunter.
If your opponent played nothing and you had cube, Terror Scales, imagine if they drew cube now.
It would not play it.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
I would just play like Terror Scale Stalker and Hero Power and hit face over cubing the 5-3. It's just like, again, I just think that Sap is the card you lose to in this matchup. And I don't think we've been in a world where you've forced Sap out of their hand if it's there. Right? Like, this is the most ahead.
Because of the backstab.
Yeah, this is the most ahead they've been the entire game.
Okay. Also, this does... This egg is a nice draw.
Yes, it
so
is.
Let's just live in the real world right now where you can just egg Play Dead Hero Power anyway. I think that has to be the case. We talked about how important it is the Hunter going wide.
Yeah, it's
as wide as you normally get.
It's beautiful, because if this egg doesn't get dealt with, then on the next turn you have Terror Scale Stalker into Void Ripper, and that's game. That's too many 5-5s. They can't answer that. And because you're playing this egg down alongside another aggressive board, this egg is much less likely to be dealt with than the first egg you played, because Rogue has to deal with the 5-5 and the 3-3. There's an imminent threat of death being presented to them.
5-5 can be dealt with the Valspine, but like you said, that we can see the future at this point, in which one Valspine isn't really going to cut it. I wonder if... Ooh, this deck gets hard to deal with when it does this, right? I think, like, do you almost have to, like, Cold Blood the 5-5, Valspine the 5-5, and then Shadow Step ready for Feldora Valspine again? Because I don't think you can imagine there's a world where you can just hard cast Sprint next turn.
Right.
I think you just presume you're dead at that point. So I think we might see the Shadow Step to set it up here.
Lets you draw prep as well, so you could then prep Sprint Valspine, but is that going to be good enough? I don't know. I'll tell you what is good enough, and that's this turn from Poland.
Yeah.
All right, Frodan.
That was on purpose.
Yeah, I know.
My worry here is you just know the Valspine's dead, and it's unlikely, especially on turn 6. What does the hand have to look like for the Hunter to not have more minion development right here?
Yeah.
It has to look really bad.
It can. There are some bad hands with this Hunter deck. It's possible.
Trying to pitch it. Yeah, look, I mean...
Yeah, I did. Like, I called this turn, you know, two rotations of the board ago. It was just always going to be the line. I set this up right from the start and said, if you can do one huge turn where the board spreads wide, that's game. Rogue just can't, doesn't have the tools to deal.
Yeah, and this does not happen often, though. Look at the hand for Surrender.
Yeah.
It's double sprint, Shadow Step. They just about drew a Valspine to do something, and which they had to use a Cold Blood.
Yep.
They've also had no spiders from the Feldora that they played earlier. So
they've drawn, what, 2 cards since they played it?
No, I'm just saying it all adds together to make a terrible situation, right? Leroy face, let's go. Just has to be the hard cast sprint. There's no other option.
And remember, A8 from Poland called out this particular Rogue deck as being badly built, and I think you just saw a nod there from Davido as if to say, yep, nice sprint, buddy. We will take the victory and we will square things up 2-2.
Yeah, and we've seen twice now Hunter get wins it doesn't normally get in the average matchup.
Yeah, I'm actually not too sure what the percentages are on that matchup. I suspect it's better than the Paladin matchup.
Yes.
I don't want to frame it in that light, but yes, I think Hunter perhaps overperforming based on just egg into explosions of eggs draws on both sides. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we did see just the weakness of the sprints, right? You said, although I don't think Gadgetzan would have changed the overall outcome of that game.
Because they couldn't have played a 6-mana 4/4 on the turn where it was available. They would have been way too dead.
But it is something to consider going forward. A sprint is just slower and generally harder to get off as well, because we saw then, if you don't have prep, then yes, you have to hardcast a sprint. You already have to be very ahead in a game to be able to just hardcast a sprint and be okay with it.
Yeah, so the difference is like the usage of the two cards. For me, sprint is a tool that you have to use when it's as close to the last card in your hand as possible.
Right.
You've done everything else, you've maxed out on tempo, you've pushed as hard as you can, then you cast sprint to refill. Whereas Auctioneer, you just use it when it's the best.
We can cold blood an Auctioneer, right?
Right, exactly. Like it doesn't matter if you've got a hand with 6 or 7 cards. If you've got a good Auctioneer turn, it's just a good Auctioneer turn. That's just the power level of the card. And I think for me, that just kind of crystallizes the decision point between the two cards. Sprint is a card you cast because you have to. Auctioneer is a card you cast because you want to.
Sprint's very much the divine favor of Rogue, right? Like you've already done your bit, and then you're on the last ditch push to get something done. But let's check out what the last game is going to be, the deciding game. And there's a lot on the line here, as it is our production team here in Poland versus me right now. And it's also, I would say, to be honest, for me, the 2 star players of the team as well. 3650 is going to control this deck, and Surrender is going to go again back-to-back as the pilot of this warrior deck as well.
Yes, and this is even Warlock from Poland, unlike the Q block that we saw earlier from Dak Rivius. And yeah, just up against Taunt Warrior from Surrender. And it kind of doesn't even need clarifying. Have we seen any other warrior archetype be played? I think there was maybe like 1 Fatigue Warrior or something, and an Odd Warrior.
There was
perhaps,
1 Fatigue Warrior, 1 Odd Warrior in the total decks that were put forward. And I do believe the Fatigue Warrior got banned.
Okay.
In I can't remember the odd one, so I do apologize. But I was looking at the pick and ban rates for all the classes from last week and all the decks. But I think the Fatigue Warrior was banned out, which was kind of funny.
But so Paladin is the only class that we've seen universal being odd up until this point. But now I believe in the next series that's about to be cast, we have an even Paladin.
Oh yeah,
is that correct? Did we receive that information, Raven? I don't believe it.
We received it from Lorinda and Falk, so pinch of salt and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I actually was when the nurse came in. I know
brush the dirt off your shoulder, Raven.
There we go. Yeah, just
you're feeling like a pimp.
Yep. No, it's not agreeing to that. But yeah, I when the
I didn't sign up for this.
No, yes. There you go. I don't know if you heard that, but I threw my pen in disgust at Saul's words. And also nearly fell off my chair. What's going on? Oh, I know what's happened. It's okay. So anyway, let's get back to the serious things of South Korea versus Poland. Last game, everything to play for now. Both of these teams are 1-0. They'll propel themselves forward to 2-0 to whoever wins this game. It's going to be the Taunt Warrior for South Korea and Surrender as the pilot. And then it's going to be the even lock for Poland with 883650. Controlling this one, and Skull King Geist, not really highly impactful in this matchup.
No. If you were a Druid, you might be able to play it early enough to burn the quest.
That's a ramp joke.
It's a really, bad meta joke. Yeah.
It's like a biology project joke. Cards not even out yet, Sol. Don't know if you can make jokes about it. How does this matchup go, in your opinion, though?
Something giant, something Gul'dan.
Okay. I got all of that.
I mean, so this is even lock in a nutshell, right? Where it's a very limited deck on threats, kind of similar to how I was describing Control Warlock earlier when I was talking about the even Shaman matchup, but to a lesser degree, right? There's some mid-rangey things in there. There's some 4/4s and just extra dudes that you can play out. But in terms of the big things that Warrior needs to be scared of, there's just a couple of threat checks that they have to pass, and that's about it.
Right, and does the Warrior have the ability to do that? Do they have enough removal if the Warlock's playing correctly, keeping the board size down, for example?
On average, there will be a threat that sticks between turn 4 and turn 6. It's just, the size of that threat, because 2 executes, 1 to 2 shield slams being played, that's about it. It's not the deck where you can finagle your Blood Razors and your Warpaths to be able to find you through board states as you can against other decks. These 4/9s and 8/8s just need to be executed or shield slammed, and because you're under so much pressure, you rarely get the armor total to be able to shield slam anything.
You'd probably on average 1 shield slam out of 2 per game, right? I will say as well, it's definitely hard when you mention the Blood Razors and the Warpaths. Setting up damage removal over time is also pretty hard because of cards like we can see on the far left, the Shroom Brewer. You know, oh, okay, I'll do 5 damage to the Giant this turn, then clear it off the turn. Whoop, healed. It's like, oh, well, I'm dead. It's like, and that is sometimes how it goes, because when you don't draw those executes, like we can see Surrender doesn't have them now, then you've got to have a plan of some kind, right? Like, Coin Brawl, win the 50-50. Gets really difficult, actually.
And I do like this early game sequencing from A8. This is actually something that, again, if you're a more casual player, a newer player, and you're trying to learn even lock, just kind of study up. Go find a streamer and ask them all the different routes you can take, opening with even lock that end in a Mountain Giant, because there are many more of them than there used to be in handlock, for example. And you saw here, Poland chose to play out a minion on their turn 3 and still have the ability to tap into Giant on turn 4. Which left them in this position that you see here, where that Homunculus has actually chipped away on the armor total for a couple of swings now, which means that they're limiting the outs for Surrender and Korea to be able to deal with the Mountain Giant, because that Shield Slam just can't get up to the totals it needs to be at.
Yep, Shield Block and Shield Slam do add up to 4 in the terms of mana cost, but not doable when you only get 5 armor. And also, again, like we said, imagine that setup happens. And you're like, right, well, there's 5, I can do something else. No, Shroom Brewer will just come down and heal it as well. And this looks like it could just be a little bit too much right now for Team South Korea, even in these early moments of the game. No swing. Not going to take the 2-1 down.
They do have second Blood Razor in hand, they do have Warpath in hand. All of these are options to be able to whirlwind down that extra 2-1 anyway, so they might just be looking at it as more damage. And it seems unlikely that a Shroom Brewer would be used to heal up a Volga Homunculus. It seems like somewhat of a waste in the position when you have a Mountain Giant on board.
Yeah, because the issue they've got here now is there's the fear, right? What if there's Execute next turn? Because I wouldn't even be too upset at Shroom Brewer on the Giant.
They also, by leaving this 2-1 up, they give themselves better brawls, right? If Shroom Brewer comes down and heals the Mountain Giant, then Surrender can feel okay about brawling. Whereas if you killed the 2-1 last turn and this play happens,
that's horrible.
It's not a brawlable board. So actually, all things considered, not killing the 2-1, although it looks weird on the surface, is actually a great spot from Korea.
And mainly they have Warpath available, right? They don't need to guarantee that second Whirlwind from the swing of the weapon.
Right. I do think the brawl just ends up being the most important factor here. I think, you know, for sure, if like a Twilight Drake came down here, it would just have to be a brawlable board because they left that 2-1 available. But yeah, even here with the Shroom Brewer, which was the example I gave, they just decide they have to go.
I was literally going through the hand there for Surrender.
Oh, mama. That is World Championship level play there from A83650.
World Championship level fist pumping and going, yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
I will say though, I was going through Surrender's hand, and there was no combo of cards that even set anything good up. That was the problem. It just had to be the cross your fingers and brawl.
And a Lichy boy on top as well. The pressure is going to keep coming. Hot and heavy now for Poland. South Korea are going to need all the executes, all of them. Gather them from the 4 corners of the globe and deliver them to Korea's hand.
There you go. There's number 1.
Easy.
What's funny is though, there is a turn gap between now and the Lich King for A83650.
There's a 6-5 that's playable.
It's not a Lich King though, is it?
It's a thing. It hits you. It hurts. You're sad about it. You seem deep in thought right now, Raven.
How can Korea win?
I thought you like had some kind of line, but you're actually just sad.
Yes.
You're essentially the Hearthstone casting equivalent of the movie cliche when someone looks out the window and it's raining.
Yeah, someone cue hello darkness, my old friend. in all seriousness, though, this is a extremely tough spot for Team Korea. The execute came just a turn or so too late. It took way too much damage, and also, as you said, the threats in that might not be the hugest threats in the world, but even like, again, the Geist is still going to be on the board.
Yeah.
And then, so Geist clears up the 1-4, again comes down, or, you know, Twilight Drake maybe, don't know. And this is just too much of a problem right now. There is coin Garrosh.
Yeah, and I think that's why the 6-5 being at least a 6-5 is a very big deal.
Yeah.
Because obviously the Geist is going to trade through and it's going to go down to 4 health, so having that extra 5 health minion on board is just going to shut down the Garrosh option as a game-winning play, I think. Could also do similar things, manipulating options with Sunfury positioning as well, if you wanted to, alongside a Twilight Drake.
Yeah, have it just taunt the one.
Yep.
Shields up.
Tap, tap, taparoo. Ooh. Ooh. Just had a little thought about pushing 4 there, because reasons. I guess, yeah, since you can get below 15, the Hooked Reaver just makes more sense than the Twilight Drake, obviously, in this position. I just overlooked the life tap possibility.
Dry Whisker, Brawl, let's go. Take the 50-50 of having an okay outcome. Maybe that's enough leeway to set up for a Tar Lord. They're all tough questions. We can see the removal, we can see the silence, we can see the Lich King.
Yes, exactly.
But
In South Korea's world, it looks like a appealing play that might just help them turn the corner, but we can see that even in the 50-50 scenario, or even in the 1 in 4 scenario where Surrender just straight up wins this brawl, Poland is still completely chilling.
Okay, second best outcome for Team Korea, of course.
Litchi boy, your turn.
His hand will be full.
He has Gul'dan already. Don't care.
I never said you should care. I was
No.
just saying his hand will be full.
No, and you're right to point it out.
It's something you do get carried away with sometimes,
Yeah.
right? When you play in, it's like, oh, of course Lich King's great here. Oh wait, I've tapped every single turn of the game. Whoops. But yes, of course, having Gul'dan and you've played Demons, you know, it ticks both boxes.
Right.
There is coin now available for Phantom Militia for triple. I think that's what has to happen. It requires a fire plus the Hellfire.
Yes.
Clear it off. It doesn't mean that 10 is going to be pushed regardless. Sorry, 13 with the Hellfire, of course. But it's all Team South Korea has. Like, any other plays nowhere near as good. Tar Lord too weak to silence.
He's too far.
It's too much damage not to push, right? You do send your Lich King down to an 8-4, but it's not like Surrender can really Scourge Lord up and smack it, right? That's just
Right.
not a thing.
And if he does, hey, Gul'dan.
Yeah.
What up? Yeah, I think actually now Poland are just too far ahead for it to matter to a large extent. There's very few like comeback options here for Team South Korea, because it's only going to get worse from this point.
I wonder.
You don't develop anything alongside is like the only downside here. You could make a much better play into the board if you didn't go for the damage push with the File Hellfire. But it's 50% of your opponent's health total. Like, I'm
Right.
trying to talk myself out of it, and I
don't know why.
I just can't.
Yeah, I don't know why. You're being silly.
Smack him in the mush.
So shield block into shield slam, even shield block into chain gang keeps Team South Korea alive on paper.
Yeah.
Not on board though. Sorry, not with the Hand of Poland included, because there's silence and the spellstone. So.
How long?
Gotta do what you gotta do.
How long can this go on?
Saronite coming down, healing up now to 12, armoring up now to 12 even. Now, is there an adorable little defile play you can make? Because you do have 1/1s in that cornered sentry. I don't think that helps you out too much.
No.
So you want to just push 8 more this turn?
I wonder.
I'm about it.
My only worry, if you're pushing 8, the board does become clearable. And then there's a whole turn of Gul'dan.
That's fair.
So there's just one thing to... I wonder if you could even Gul'dan this turn.
Hey, you know the discussion that we had backstage earlier? It's turn 10. Gul'dan's green. Stop thinking was, I believe, the line that I made. But actually, then contradicting myself, I do quite like pushing some damage this turn.
Your magic.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is bad at all. It just... The board becomes clearable at this point, and you haven't killed your opponent, and you have no damage from hand without minions on board. Right. Oh, never mind. That helps.
It does. I guess the extra 4/3 on board is relevant by wondering whether like spellbreakering bigger taunts is relevant later versus the 4/3 on board right now. Because I think like when you know your opponent doesn't have Shield Slam, you know they don't have Execute, right? Because both of those cards kill your Lich King last turn. So what clears this board is Warpath style stuff, right? So a 4/3 on board doesn't live really through anything that an 8/4 doesn't. So I wonder about the extra 4/3 on board as opposed to just using both Spellstones. But I think that's a fully upgraded on the left side for Poland, right? It's a greater.
Yes.
So they can deal 7 with that anyway. So yeah, okay, I guess it all comes out in the wash, and just the 4/3 on board just makes sense in that position.
The tricky part here that's thrown the spanner in the works is that Korea could Acolyte, triple Warpath, clear the board, draw 3 cards. Yeah, you don't gain armor. And there's 2 Lich King cards in hand that I'm sure they're aware of. They probably didn't close their eyes every time the Lich King happened and hope their card wasn't there.
This is a fascinating tale, Raven. Do tell me more.
You're probably just going to get Mortal Coil in the face next turn. And don't get me wrong, yes, I see they have Mortal Coil. But here's something you have to consider. When there's Mortal Coil, there's also...
So that's 3. You'll figure it out in a minute, guys. Don't worry.
How many times is the same Mortal Coil?
4.
There are Lich King cards.
It's called Death Coil.
Right, well, sorry. Well, it will help if you point this out. Coil.
I'm just trying my best.
That wasn't trying your best. If trying your best of pointing something out doesn't revolve pointing it out obviously, then you did not try your best. Stop taking Poland's win away from them. They took the win over South Korea there, and it was a very tough ending for South Korea, I feel like. The Rogue into the Warrior. The Warrior didn't get the Execute. The Rogue only got sprints by the feel of that game.
Oh, sorry, yeah, them playing the Rogue and then playing the Warrior. Right?
The back-to-back matches.
Yeah.
So, don't get me wrong, I think Poland played very steady, very solid. But, you know, a couple of unfortunate draws made some of those matchups harder than they would normally be in some circumstances. But huge congratulations to Poland. They go 2-0 now in the Swiss and taking down some pretty good teams, especially this current one in the form of Korea.
Good. Yeah, I think Korea, again, established that they're a pretty good team because you saw that even in a losing effort, they were making great situations for themselves, right? With the Brawl setup, for example, which they then ended up getting the worst outcome against. You know, leaving that 2-1 alive is just a very, very good piece of control player recognition. Whether it was Surrender as the pilot or someone else, we don't know. But, you know, there were moments like that throughout the series where they were, you know, perhaps maximizing their odds in losing situations. But sometimes that pays out for you. It's just today wasn't their day.
Yep, we can check out the scores, I believe, for an update. Oh, sorry, we got an interview, of course. Poland won.
Yep.
I'm not going to be very
I know that you would much rather South Korea won, Raven, but we do have an interview with Davido here. Davido, first off, well played. Obviously, the series went down to the wire, went down to the last game. Were you feeling confident in the last matchup?
Thank you very much. Yes, we were feeling confident in the last game. In the very last game, beforehand, there were some really tough spots in the series, but. Yeah, we kept our cool for the last game.
Okay, so I want to ask you about, I spoke to AA a little bit early today, actually, just asking about the lineup you guys chose, and the Even Shaman specifically was brought up, saying you guys had thought about it a bit, kind of theory crafted it a little bit, and thought it was the correct version of Shaman to bring. Why was that? Did things go to plan? Because Shudderwock's so popular right now.
Yes, it is. But you know what? When you look at last week, the control mage was not performing that good, and tempo mage was coming in. And assuming your opponent has tempo mage in your lineup, in their lineup, you suddenly feel pretty good about being even log in comparison to Shudderwock. And we felt that Shudderwock in most of our pick and ban phases, because we did those just for practice, is a pretty weak deck overall. It has like more bad matchups than good matchups. So we went with a little change this week, and we won the unfavored matchup actually. But yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's just a very interesting choice. And do you feel like, just a quick one before Sal's got a question,
Sure.
it seems. Do you feel like this kind of pick and ban practicing has paid off a lot for you? I know you won the series, but is this something you're going to try and do every single week? Just practice how these pick and bans roll out?
We didn't practice the pick and ban phases that much, like this week, coming into this week, but beforehand, just learning the format, we did a lot. And I think like you need the experience to know how to, navigate throughout those phases, because we just try to actually not gonna say what we are trying to do.
Oh yeah, that's why I didn't ask you about your strategy, just if you felt it was working. Yeah.
I think it's important. I wouldn't say we won directly in the pick and ban phase here, but obviously you have the Q order after that, and there's randomness involved in that, so you can still just lose.
So before we let you go, I just wanted to ask you about one particular turn in that last game. When South Korea left the 2-1 alive, it was kind of like signaling brawl to you guys, right? That they left it there. Did you know it was going to happen and just like play into it anyway? Just 1 out of 3 times the giant lives and we win?
Yeah, we know about that, like straight up. But the thing is, if they didn't have a execute activator, they are also setting up execute. So if you do nothing, they execute, and then you just do nothing for the next turn, and you don't kill warrior by doing nothing. So like we developed the 4/4, so we don't really like lose a big body versus brawl. Like assuming whatever leaves the brawl doesn't really matter. I mean it does, but
not as much, right?
Yeah. So we protect the giant from execute. So I think it was a nice compromise.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for your time, and congratulations again on the match. Oh,
sorry, can I shout out?
Do you want to ask? Yeah, of course.
We have to shout out our friend from Poland, Laken, because he helped us a lot with the preparation, and Zino as well. So I really wanted to give the guys a shout out today.
No, by all means, and again, shout out to those guys, because it's just it's not just about you four; it's about who your practice partners and anyone who cheers for you or helps you anyway. So again, congratulations on the win, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you very much. Hopefully, talk again. Yep.
Yeah, hopefully, we can talk again. It's fine now that they've played Korea.
Spoilers, we're not here, so he can be talking.
Yeah,
he can be talking to someone. It's not us.
You could just message me. Hey, how's it going, Raven? Yeah, not bad.
Davido, if you want to hang out, we can hang out. It's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. We can check about the review of the matchup overall, though. And again, I will just highlight these Hunter decks. I just want to see more and more and more and more and more games of Hunter. I want to see how everyone plays it. I want to see what happens in the matchups, because at the moment, for me, they're by far the most interesting deck that we have current in the meta.
Yeah, and then it was honestly a series where Hunter looked quite weak when we looked at it on this matchup board, right? And it still came out with 2 victories. It just shows, that the best draws for this Hunter deck are like right up there in terms of being able to compete with anything. But that's not how you judge a deck. Of course, you have to judge a deck by the average of all of its possible combinations of draw. And we'll see exactly how long that Hunter deck sticks around, because of course it doesn't have long to take its pride of place in the metagame before the next expansion rolls around and changes everything.
Yeah, maybe even gets more tools. But let's take a look at how the way this matchup played out of South Korea versus Poland. And again, speaking of Hunter, when you go this wide versus a Paladin, pull it off and then finish with a bloat bat, play dead to clear the board, it's pretty snazzy, and you see the power of eventually going wide with this deck.
Yep, absolutely. And as we mentioned, even the style point, second play dead just to kill a 1-1, just to push through. And now this was a beating. And actually, the end of this turn is something that I really did want to talk about in more detail before we were rudely interrupted. Because it was a really, really crucial turn at the end there about whether to leave your Doomsayer on board, which is potentially a play to win the game, or to Dark Pact it, which is a play potentially not to die that turn, right? Like, I think that Doomsayer has to go off so they can find their turn 9 to be secure and then play Gul'dan. I think I'm on board with that play, but I'd love to really go back to it and break it down in detail.
And we probably will later on at some point.
Maybe.
We've got the time. We've got the time. And then we see the Shaman versus the Warrior. The game pretty much out of Poland's hands as Korea managed to just play slow enough and not, have enough time actually just to be able to craft the Shudderwock turn as and how they felt fit. And then we saw the complete blowout on the reverse side with the Hunter going against South Korean Surrender's Rogue, where the double sprint draw and, to be honest, not much else was pretty much the final blow for that game.
And here you see that moment that I asked Davido about. A8 rocks back in his chair, says, "Do you know who I am? I'm A83650. I'm famous. My mountain giants win brawls." And it was just downhill from there. I mean, look at the difference. You hate to just highlight, moments of randomness in games of Hearthstone. I do always try to look for decisions that have been made. But the difference between that 8-8 connecting as many times as it did and even the 4-4 doing so is just night and day. Right?
Well, also the 4-4 could have been killed by Warpath, whereas the 8-8 just couldn't. And again, as you said, to highlight, it's just the difference between an 8-8 and not, right? Like, the sticking is just going to make that much of an impact. Players normally only have about 30 health.
It's the difference between an 8-8 and an A8. I
don't know if that works that well, but I'll let you have it. But just to try and get away from Sol's poorly crafted wordplay, we're going to go to a short break while we start the next match. So don't go anywhere, guys. We'll be right back.